right. Okie dokie. Let's see here. All right. So let's just focus on positives here. Less on the downside. 4, 5, 10, 13. Yeah, I know. Hey, I said I wasn't going to come back unless it broke out. We may get something very end of the day, but just here to clean up the chart a bit, make sure everything looks like I want it to look going into Friday. I'll do a little AMC update in a minute. Oh, I did take a break. Ha! Well, so this like last hour of price action, I've been watching it off to the side, and I wasn't going to come back because there's nothing really to report if it doesn't break out. But the overall move here looked pretty good, so I wanted to kind of check in and just kind of clean up the chart and do a quick end of the day stream. Yep, real low volume. There's that retest that happened on the RSI here, and it reset. So we are currently sitting around the 50s to 60s on the 6 minute. So there's plenty of space potentially for some upside. You know, I'm not really expecting a whole lot beyond what we're already kind of experiencing right now, but there is a positive side to it. So I just wanted to point out that it did come back down. It didn't break out. It just came back down and double bottomed at 509. So, you know, if there was any doubt that 509 needed to be checked, I don't think that doubt is there anymore. So what I want to do is just kind of focus on cleaning it up a bit and reassessing kind of like the more basic stuff. And it's been a minute, so I want to make sure that we do that, and maybe clean up some of the other stuff I did yesterday. So one of the things that was kind of, I guess, irritating me yesterday was the just kind of the noise from folks that were not kind of feeling the price action. And I just felt like, you know, everybody's kind of in that same situation. Nobody's really like excited about watching a chart go sideways forever. It's not exciting, you know, it's just not. So I get it. I'm with you on that. And the volume today has been abysmally low and boring, and everything else seems to be making moves, and AMC's not making moves. And I'm with you on that. It is kind of a pain. I feel like at some point we're going to be busting out the cigars and whatever your fancy is for bigger moves. I think it's going to happen, but I also think that in the meantime, I'm trying to make the most of it, take these off days to do some other stuff and make sure I get stuff done around the house and around my other business that I run. And there's just a lot of good things going on here to do that don't involve the stock market. So I was trying to focus on some of that. And I guess got a few hours of work in today, so I was happy with that. And I won't be on long. So if you're expecting like a super long stream, unless something crazy happens in extended hours or something, I'm probably not going to be on very long. So what I wanted to do was work on just cleaning it up a bit, making sure that my levels are right and that we've got sort of a sense of continuity here. Everything going on, it was easy for me to focus only on like short-term stuff. But I haven't really done a lot to update the long-term chart since we started going flat. And it needs to be updated because we've been going flat. We didn't make the moves, and there was no follow through with that price action. So anyways, so what happened this afternoon was we came back, at least on the 6-minute time frame, which is the one I was looking at earlier, just to kind of have a time frame to stick with. We reset that RSI right where we thought it might reset. We're just kind of waiting. It's just sitting right underneath the breakout level at 513. It looks to me like really good because we had this pump and then just very, very, very low volume hold here. So I would say that's primed to kind of rip either direction at this point. You could make an argument for either one, but I would say it's definitely in a good spot for a potentially large move. So I wanted to come back and look at the sort of the check boxes here that we had and go back through those, see if I missed anything. So I wanted to clean up. Because I was staring at this chart and I was like, you know, I haven't really done a lot to clean it up in the last week. Make sure that my levels are right. I spent a lot of time doing these like cross sections and stuff, and not a lot of time cleaning stuff up. So here's something that occurred to me also while I was staring at my own chart. GME looks fine. There's nothing to say about GME other than what's already been said. So I mean, this is basically the line I had drawn this morning, and I just recreated it a few hours ago, and I said it would make more sense for it to come back down again. It's still confirmation here because it did support it. Now it's acting as a support. It should continue to act as a support. So if you come back to retest it, it should be fine. I'm not seeing any problems. That volume has nice rounded top volume there. It's a little head and shoulder like, you know, but it's straightforward. It's coming back down to 22, 32. You want to have that pullback. It's not irrelevant. It's very important. This would be a very critical area on the big picture to have that. And we went up to the 4-hour time frame. There was no evidence of that pullback, but there should be now. So it's a good thing. Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to be dismissive of your comment. I'm just saying that there's nothing to report. It's kind of just doing what it needs to do, I guess. I don't know. To check that level, it's really important. So all of these are just wave crosses that are going up. Still got that narrowing, so that's a little bit scary, you know. You look at that narrowing range. But at this point, if it can hold above 2230, I don't have any problems with it at all. Saying there should be some kind of continuity. I said that earlier. I feel the same now. Like it's just a matter of probably come back to retest it on a bigger picture. Jim, I'm I'm going to tell you what I tell everybody else, which is just how I feel about it. I don't think AMC is going to recover back to all-time highs the way that a lot of folks may think, at least not in the short term, not within the next year and 5 months or so. I think that it will go by February of 2026 up to about 130, which is close to the kind of original starting point. So if you look at the chart as it is now and you look at the opening price of AMC when it first opened in 2000 and whatever it was, 13 or 16, I don't remember, 13 or 14. If you look at the original opening price of AMC, it seems that that's probable as the long-term target now. So I don't believe it's going to rocket necessarily after that, but there's evidence of it. Like, there's people out there who've made a technical case, and I found that technical case to be okay. I mean, it's just to me, it's a matter of opinion and how far you think it can go. So I don't think it's going to go there, but that's just my opinion. You know? I think that 45 is an easy to find target. I think that 68 to 75, kind of similar to the original all-time high numbers, albeit after the reverse split. I think those are reasonable numbers. And then I think about 130. And to be honest with you guys, those numbers haven't really changed that much since the very beginning. Long time ago, when I did some of you will remember it, I did that mother of all charts thing. Those things didn't have like ridiculously high numbers. They were like $80. They were $90. They were 110, 130. I mean, that markup value came from a assumed markup or assumed top that was roughly the same as, like, we only went like 100%. It looked like we did something crazy, right, when we went up to the top at just 72, but big picture, we only made like 100% markup from the original all-time highs, which were like around 35. It's a big deal. Don't get me wrong, but when people talk about those runs, we talk about the percentage that it moved. We don't often talk about how high it actually marked up. And so some of the early numbers that I was getting were not like what people do with their fib extensions, where they just get these massive fib extensions and then that's it. Some of the stuff that I was doing early on with the fractal analysis still wasn't giving me, because I'm not the kind of person that grabs the biggest fractal I can find with the biggest run and just slaps it and says that this is the macro picture. Like, I'm looking at things as if it's just a giant wave, and I don't see the wave going up ridiculously high, because I don't think there's a way to prove, I just don't think there's a way to prove it. Like, there's no way to prove that it's going to continue upward at this point. You would have an easier argument proving that it's going to continue downward. That means that you have another big push, like up to 80 or 90, maybe even 100, and then it comes back down again. Like, that's an easier argument, far easier argument than to say it's going to reverse and go to new all-time highs. So that's just where I'm at. I'm not going to go through my chart. I do it like all the time on here, but I'm not going to do it right now. The macro chart. It's it's something, if you're around every now and then, I'll go through it. I've done it, I think, a couple times this past week even. But I don't want to do it every single day because people get kind of tired of it. I get tired of it. It's kind of the same thing every day. So it's the same thing every time. You get roughly a target around February of 2026 to March, April, that kind of time period. And that's where it hits the highs. And it's about 120, 130. I'll just give it to you bare bones. Before that point, I think there's a lot more that we could say about speculation and what may or may not happen. A lot more you could say. So, we're not there yet. So another reason I wanted to watch the last 10 or 15 minutes is because lately that seems to be the only time we've had any real volume is in the last minutes of the day or the very, very beginning of the day. Literally, like the bookends of the day have been giving us decent volume influxes, and other than that, we have not had good volume. So I figured it would be worth watching and seeing what happens at the end of the day today, because I expect the volume will come in like the last 15 minutes, and it seems that it is. We're pushing right now. We're at 514, back to 513. These are the highs that we've hit today regularly, and we're coming back to them end of day. So it's an interesting time to be watching it to see if it can make any advances. The first few times it did that, it did not stick, but it did stick today. The advance we made right at the end did stick. So it may be the case again tomorrow, you know. Anyways, yeah, so for folks like Jim, if you're just kind of stuck in the play and you just want to get out, I can just tell you what I think, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. I mean, there's a good technical case for it. I've made it many, many times on the stream. I'm not going to, again, do it right now. But if you're just kind of like stuck in it and you're wondering, like, is it ever going to go back up? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty likely we're going to go back up. In my opinion, I think it's almost a given, but the time it would take to come back up is a pretty long-winded cycle. And this is where I think early in the year, I think a lot of people would have looked at what I said and maybe disagreed, because I actually had it maybe going to 14 and then down to 250 and then staying really low for like nearly a year. And we've had obviously different things happen, but it has largely stayed very low for the entire year. So parts of that prediction in January that I made were pretty accurate. I think that sine wave didn't really deviate, and it ended up coming down to those lows. There's just a lot of folks out there that expect this to look just like the last time, and I think to some degree it might. You know, there's going to be portions of massive moves, but this is a different time. You know, we got a completely different setup, and there's a lot that could happen between now and 2026. A lot that could happen in the next year. And I think that the wave itself is very, very long. So it just doesn't make sense to me that you would assume that it would go faster just because you want it to. I think it's a very, very, very long game for long operators. And they're comfortable with that. And they don't care about me and they don't care about you. They just care about their bottom line. So anyway, the thought occurred to me here that on this particular move, there was an S-curve here, but then as I was staring at this chart when the stream was off, the thought occurred to me that I did measure from here and up, and I feel like that was right, but there is another S-curve here, and I hate to say that because it's like, well, Booksy, there's like 5, right? Well, it's true. There's a lot. There's this one right here, which is really tight. There's one other one that seems a lot longer. And now I'm kind of wondering if what we've really experienced and what everybody feels like is we feel like we're being delayed. And normally I'm not a big fan of that word because typically, like, once the iterations are over, you just kind of move on. But lately it has definitely felt like, man, with no volume here, it just feels like you're getting dragged out. And I was sitting here and I'm doing some other work and I'm just glancing over and I'm like, you know, these S-curves seem pretty straightforward to me. Like, they seem like they're just broken and they don't continue. And they're very easy. This one's really different because it doesn't seem to me anyways, to be like a single attempt. So what I had done first was I had looked at this one and said, well, that's where the middle is. That's probably where it breaks up. I'm not changing my mind about anything. I'm not changing my mind about that. I still think that was a change of character right here. But I also wondered, because I was like, well, isn't that still... This is still an S-curve, like just like this one is, but this one does go pretty far. And I think someone could look at this and make an argument that it did finish. It's kind of interesting. So it almost looks like three that are stretched out because of how each of these peaked. It looks like an expansion of the same thing. And I don't want to be like a Mr. Tinfoil Hat or divulge into some kind of weird thinking about expanding fractals and all this other weird stuff. But it does kind of look like a method of maybe exhaustion. And it seems to me that there's three very distinct S-curves here that are all branching from like the same place. And I find that to be kind of peculiar because that's not normal, for one. And also because it does generate completely different trajectories every time. So like each time these things have done this kind of secondary move, secondary and, you know, tertiary, I mean, it just keeps going. Every time it's done it, it's been a wider S-curve. And I don't, normally I guess I wouldn't entertain this kind of stuff because it doesn't seem right to me. But as I was like looking at this, I was like, you know, maybe it's just as simple as what we're saying it is. Maybe there's nothing fancy about it. I can agree that this could be a potential delay while not agreeing that every single time the stock does something like this, it's some kind of delay. They're not exclusive, you know, they don't have to be, or excuse me, they're not the same thing. So me making one claim doesn't mean that every other claim is somehow false or something like that. So the thought just occurred to me that really every one of these moves is stemming from that middle marker, and it does it like 3 times, you know? And so it's a bit odd, but I kind of wondered if that concept of like dragging it out isn't so far off. As much as I know that I don't like that idea, because it makes it seem like someone doesn't know what they're doing. And it makes it seem like there wasn't a plan. This particular concept here, I think it's this concept of the foretop, like 1, 2, 3, 4, where the fourth is either a make or break. That to me makes sense. But the way in which it's happening is very odd. And then it made me think, if that's the case, and I've never really looked at it as expanding S-curves, if that's the case, then there's multiple trajectories here. And that throws me off, because I'm like, well, then how do you pick which one you want to pick? And some of you guys are probably watching, and you're like completely lost. You're like, well, why does that matter? Well, if you're like brand new, and you're not been on this channel very much, and you don't know what I'm doing, I probably won't be able to explain it to you in like 30 seconds, but basically, these are trajectories that matter. So like, especially the one from like the middle, we call it like the middle of the cat ears. And if the assumption was that this was the middle, or this was the middle, or this was the middle, or this was the middle, it drastically changes that projection. So this is very different from this. And before you like get really angry and say, well, why didn't you think of that sooner? It's not really that simple. This is very long compared to what I call like the left side. So in terms of like wave distance, the wave distance was really narrow. This is clearly like shrinking down and compressing till here. And then the rest of this doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of timing. Because like, if you look at the left side wave, there's no right side wave completion within the same amount of time. And before you say anything about that, I'll just say this. It's pretty common that that's the case. Like it's usually about the same. So I would have expected that left side to kind of complete, and maybe it did, you know, maybe it did complete here. and we're doing it again, and so on and so forth. And that's where I've been like, okay, this is kind of a waste of time because we're just chopping, we're not moving, we're not advancing. This is going to be like the first day that we don't have some kind of high volume push, isn't it? Now that we're at the top. So, anywho, the thought just occurred to me that when I did that doodle earlier, I was talking about those wave crosses, and I'm like, every one of those is because we're expanding outward, so we're turning up, and this is trying to attempt to break out. It's dangerous, guys, because this is the same way that you break down. I mean, it's the same exact way. So it's dangerous because you're generating like up thrusts that are not going, you know, and you don't want to be in a place where you're failing to advance. It's just not good, period. So we've got a lot that has to happen now, and I'm wondering like if we were right, like this is indeed like an M cross and then another one on that whole right side, and it's just taking its sweet fat time, and it kind of looks like that. It reminds me of that move. So anyways, it's just a thought. It may not help you guys feel at ease about anything. It's just a thought, because I'm like, well, there's something wrong with the way in which, in terms of these iterations, there's something wrong in which can't really be reconciled by just saying, you know, one or the other with these pivots. Largely what I've noticed is that we're getting those pivots, and there's like these up thrusts right when they're happening, as if it's a possibility, but it's not following through. So on the bigger picture, it made me wonder, because I'm like, well, I know that that's a good target. I guess we watched the target. I know the number's right, but I don't know why then the S-curve was wrong. We measured the S-curve. If that's the centerfold of the S-curve here, and it is, it's one of them, but it's one of three. You know, it's the middle one of the three. The other one's kind of farther over, and it extends it out farther, and you're like, well, this is just going to go on forever, isn't it? Not really, because the last one that we just made isn't an S-curve. It's done. Like, this is the last major hook. This is a flat top. This is above the creek. It's just different. So if I were doing like from the center on this, it would look very different than from the center on the previous one, which went back to here. Does that make sense? So pretty radically different. So this is the center of this guy here, but the center of the one that's farther out is actually pretty far over, and that, again, it may seem like not a lot, but that kind of like doubles the amount of time off the center, I mean. So it's like more like there, and that frankly is like end of day Friday, so it's another garbage move, because I'm pretty sick and tired of calling for Friday moves and nothing happens. So I think it's trash. I think it's a trash curve. And I'd be genuinely surprised if this pumps Friday in a happy way, but it's like another one, right? That's kind of like what I'm feeling too. I'm like, really? You're trying to tell me there's another Friday target? Yeah, pretty much. Every single Friday we've had something like this, where there's been some upper target every single Friday. And every single Friday, somebody comes on here and says, it's max pain though. And I say, yeah, but eventually it's not going to hit it. And then every single Friday it hits max pain, and I have to swallow my pride and say, well, it wasn't this Friday. Like I'm some crazy man talking about the end of the world coming tomorrow. It's like, thanks, operator. But I mean it sincerely. Like there's no other S-curve here. Like I wouldn't draw this as a giant S-curve. I think this is the end of that. So it's at a place now where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't go any farther with this line of thinking. I would not take it to here. I just wouldn't. I would take it as far as I could. It would be here. So yeah, so that leads me to kind of like a final point about the potential for a run-up Monday is there again as well. And this is the same thing every week at this point. we've had potential run-ups every single Monday for the last like 4 weeks. And every single Monday, we're kind of coming in excited, ready to go. No one's laughing at you, Dave, but Dave, no one's laughing at you. But you have to understand that you've called out a lot of big runs here, just like in some ways like I have, but for you it's been like through the chat, and you'll say, no, it's gonna go, it's about to go, it's gonna rip. And there's been a lot of times where I've kind of been at odds with you about that, and I said I didn't think it was gonna go that way. And you made a claim earlier on the stream. I didn't want to like comment on it, but you said something about how you've been talking about some target for a month, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that's really true. No, I don't think so, buddy. I can't, and I'm not going to do this to you. I'm not going to go. Well, maybe at latest. I don't know if I can check you on that. But you've definitely said it's going to run multiple times after certain dips. And we've all kind of watched for those, and I've just been waiting for confirmation. But you said like a week ago you were really confident it was going to go. We were going to be at like $7. Yeah, ask anyone in the chat. Okay. Well, if anyone wants to chime in, I don't know. But you said like 2 weeks ago you thought we were going to be at 7 before Friday. So, that's all. I'm not trying to like bring anyone down. I feel like that's not a really fair... It's not really fair to say you called it out for like months or something when it's kind of like, well, I've definitely not gotten it right, you know, on a few of these moves. So yeah, see how this setup is very different? And then notice the move here. You see how that wave completely changes the distance traveled? I know it's frustrating, but it's the same move. It's like 3 times in a row. 1, 2, 3. This one actually looks better. So this ties right into that. Another pivot point, right? Whoop-de-doo, Booksy. Yeah, I know. Here we go again. So I think in looking backwards, we're going to probably see this somehow as important. So I'm going to address this. So one of the points here that I've got on an intersect is pretty close. This is going to chop sideways for another week plus and go on Monday the 26th. That's what you're saying, Booksy. I don't know. Kind of looks like that. It's possible it goes up here and then chops and then goes up again. So when I first looked at this chart and I looked at this range and I looked at the past on AMC, I couldn't imagine this like stair-stepping up. So one of the things that I've been pretty adamant about is that when you leave, you just kind of take off and go. And I think that's mostly true. And I think we're just kind of bored and we're upset because we're feeling kind of like empty about it. It's not really doing what we want it to do in terms of that big move. I do think it will have a rip moment, but I think I misspoke earlier because I said there really wasn't any trajectory right above us that could cause any issues. And I said maybe that 544, and I'm kind of seeing that again right now with this. And I wonder if we're going to chop and end up at 550 next week. If the operator is going to take a long stroll through the park here and not move it tomorrow, they could keep it at 5. They could keep it there, or they could bring it up to 550. It really wouldn't make a huge difference. But this model right here for that wave kind of makes sense. If you look at the midpoint on this and the midpoint on this, I mean, frankly, that actually makes more sense of going up now than later. Oh, there's that. Let me think real quick. Need to zoom out on this one. I'm willing to bet that doesn't really match that trajectory anyways. Let's use this one for that hook. Let's use 111. So what I'm doing is just kind of manually drawing a sine wave. You could just use a sine wave. Oopsie. Yeah, but I want to see it with the angles instead of the wave. I want to see how off I am. Okay, so that's pretty close to right for that, but then it does not interact at all with the others. Let me see if I can find a better one. I don't know, I kind of like 111. That looks really good to me. Okay, well, let's keep 111 for now. That's interesting. Okay. It's just more of the same. It's just more evidence that this ticks me off. It's just more evidence of delay, you know, in terms of like the current wave in and out. These trajectories have definitely been building up something fierce, but I think they've assumed a greater arc here. I don't think they're using the original trajectories, because that's pretty dang tight and it looks right to me, but then here it just kind of like just doesn't go. Like right here, these are all the dates, you know, right in the middle. All those trajectories I kept getting were like right here, as if something were supposed to be happening to the upside and it just could not go. I just keep finding like evidence that that might have been the case, like that there was not should have been, that's kind of a big bold statement, but that there could have been some kind of major move here and it just didn't happen. We even got the news. It wasn't like we didn't get the news for it. We got the news for it. The rest of the market took off, you know, to the races and at least like made a pretty big advancement. AMC just sat there. Is this the Friday where we kind of break the Friday curse of Max Payne? Maybe. But this may explain it. This may explain why I've been getting those trajectories so much. Because I think what's happening is that the whatever you want to think about, I don't really care. I'm just going to say it the way I see it visually. Okay, I know there's more to market mechanics than what I'm going to say about this visually. But like visually speaking, looking at this wave, it's almost like these were trying to complete that wave and they just couldn't do it. And it would have been sensible to come back to the top. So you can see the average top here is around the 550s with little extensions above. So it would have been completely sensible, because I'm not drawing the peaks there, but it would have been very sensible to come back up here on this wave. So I'm wondering if that's the reason why I kept getting those trajectory markers right here clustered into this corner from about, yeah, it started on Friday the 9th and it's been going through today. It's like the peak of that wave right here. All of those are pointing up, like they're trying to go to that target, but they're not able to break out and go. I wonder if we can find evidence of that on other four tops. Well, as far as I can tell, it's out of the trend down. I mean, it went across it. There's a double top here and then a double top here, and this second one went across it. But it could potentially drop back down to 5 tomorrow. I mean, you guys that want to advocate for max pain, I could totally see it now, because it's left the door wide open, and we could definitely come back to 5 without breaking below the creek again. So hooray for the bears that want to go to 5, or people that sold calls. You're not all bears, but it definitely could go there. I could see an up thrust followed by a down flush to 5, easy tomorrow. Fake out with a drive back below that goes down to 5. It's so simple, it hurts my brain, and I kind of hate it. So your operator must have some kind of vested interest in selling covered calls or something, and they just want to frustrate the market as much as they can. So it would be like a double bottom potentially. This came to like 4.99 or 5 or something like that. It works really well. Yep. Did this double top or did this come higher? I can't tell. It looks like it double topped. What was the high on this wick? 518, 518. Yeah, I was about to say, it kind of reminds me of that, this is starting to remind me of that double reversal motion, like the 1, 2, 3, 4. And that has that swooping action often. But it's almost like almost kind of looks like it's doing upside down, which would not be good. Oh man, that would suck. That's strange. Well, lesson learned, I guess, about this four-top business. I think that not knowing how to interpret it has caused me some issues. I would not be surprised if this popped to like 516 or 515 and then dumped all the way back down to 5 tomorrow. And everyone will be pissed off. But that's just the way it'll be probably. Down 3%. I was kind of wondering if this was a range right here. Since it went low, it popped up high. I was kind of thinking it could be like sort of like an AR with a phase B top support, and then it's going to go for a spring. And I think that might make sense because I think this came to 499. Yeah, it seems very likely that they're going to... This is probably like a bearish way of looking at it, but this seems really likely. Probably just rest on the 4 hour going into close, and it'll be closed at like 499 or 501 or whatever. The 4 hour is right here, the 4 hour EMA, because we kind of went right above it here, so it brought it up a little bit, so it'll be right there on Friday. So it sucks, but that's probably what's going to happen. I couldn't really imagine it just sitting here any longer. This is kind of a simple... It looks like a double top, or it looks like a four top in and of itself, which usually comes at the end. So we're basically seeing a micro iteration of this big picture right here to some degree. And yeah, my expectation is you get like one more kind of swing up, some kind of a flat top. So that's your bearish outlook for tomorrow. And then the only thing I can think that be bullish here would be I can't see a lot, but the only thing I can see here that would be really bullish would be a push to like 550. And it's there. I mean, it's not like it couldn't happen, but it'd have to be like caught right around 544. So I think we were right in some ways because we were thinking that this was going to advance here in this pocket that I've like kind of highlighted. And I think it's obvious why that would be the case. And that pinning that's been happening is preventing it from advancing above 520, which would be like a breakout for us. Meanwhile, we've kind of eked across the creek, gets bulls really excited. But if you don't move, there's a lot of frustration, especially if you drop into Friday. There'd be a lot of trepidation about that. Yeah, this is when, if you're doing it from an iterative standpoint, this is when you would try to push it low again. See how you've already come across the creek? This is where you would try to push back down. So like you look at a wave and how the wave moves. Once it gets above that creek, it has a tendency, if not a pattern, you could just say it just tends to do this. And once the wave jumps the creek, you tend to get that pretty straightforward pullback because it's going to attempt to try to see what we can get with the price drive back down. See how low you can get on that creek and see if you can push it. It's pretty normal. I mean, we just did it on the big picture, so. And us being pinned up here is kind of like when we were pinned up top here, where you're chopping around like that same 530s area for a long time. It's very similar. So we've jumped it. We made that flush, and then we kind of advanced across, and we're just chopping there, right? And you're thinking something good might happen, and then it starts selling back down, and you're confused. Well, that's sort of where we are. We're at that peak pinnacle here where you could see it break. And don't get me wrong, I'm not being bearish, by the way. You might think this is really bearish. It's not. It's just a matter of like retest. So there's only one of two things that ever happens at the end of a cat ear, and it's super straightforward. It's just up or down. And typically, it's if it's really flat like this, it's typically down because it's showing that you're not advancing. I would have been more convinced had we seen this come up, create the first ear, and done an M cross to the upside. We could have ended near the same price today, but done the jump, right? Like we could have advanced, and it didn't happen. Instead, all of that stayed below, and it got kind of pigeonholed. And that's kind of what we're seeing here on this picture too, is like instead of just advancing here, same deal. This could have advanced. It was that gap up nonsense at end of the day run. This could have advanced, held support, and gone up again. And like we'd be having a very different conversation right now if that had occurred. It's the exact same thing that we're seeing on the little micro. And it's kind of the same thing that we got on the big picture too, because we had the same kind of reactive move here, and it failed to advance. And that's when we started getting really weird and distributive. This could have, had it broken back out, it needed to make an advancement here and then go, and it didn't do that. So you see how like these are all the same? It's that pattern of that double top kind of pattern that typically results in just sort of not advancing. It's not so much I would call it like an S-curve, although maybe you could find that in the midst of it. It's just more about, well, which direction do you then go? And I think on the whole, we don't see this as just some kind of massive sell down. Rather, it's just a retracement locally, because that's the nature of it, like a 1, 2, and then back down. So to define it in like layman terms, wave up, wave down, wave up, wave down. So I think that's probably what's formed here, because these are failed attempts to try to reach those targets on this larger wave. And we keep losing those trajectories. Like it's left and right, left and right. Every single day it's been like a new one that's not worked. So this expectation of like iteration isn't wrong. It's very typical for AMC. I think the timing of it makes it impossible to kind of know. Because I know you guys are thinking like, well, then it would just end on Monday, right? Maybe. The problem with things like this is until you see that garner support, until you see that, you can't really say anything. This is not like GME in this regard, okay? GME did not make that second push up below. It pushed up above and it's come back down to it. You see the difference? We could be having the exact same conversation about GME right now had this not tried to at least try to advance here. If this had come below and it were like sitting down here and doing like little up thrusts through this top, my assumption would not necessarily be that it's going to run. My assumption might be, well, it's probably going to come backwards and check some kind of creek cross that it didn't check like here, you know? And that would be my assumption. Could it still happen? Sure, but at least for now, it's jumped up. And AMC did not do that. It did not. So I'm not like, this is not bearish. I'm just saying like for tomorrow, this seems pretty likely to me because of the lack of the move today, because another trajectory was kind of left behind. And I think all of these up thrusts are just kind of evidence of that delay. And that weird kind of S-curve expansion that we're seeing just reminds me a lot of those secondary cat ears. And they're all over the place. You can study them if you want to study them. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but you don't want to get stuck beneath. And I don't think this is that case where it's going to do that, but you don't want to get stuck beneath the hook there either. So we're not there yet, but that could be a potential problem right here if it does drop to 5. I would think that that's more of a scare tactic than anything else right now, and more of a retest on the creek, as opposed to just a flat out failure to advance. I hope I don't have to like go to great lengths to like prove any of this, but I will show you an example, a classic example that's easy to see and easy to kind of track. This is a 4 top, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't really want to get through that too much, but this is an example of one that fails to advance and then ends up hooking low. The one I was thinking about was probably the most famous one. Rudolph? No. Rudolph? No. Just said no. This one. Yeah, this is probably the most famous one because of the notoriety of it. Though there are plenty that are 1, 2, 3, 4 like that die off at the end. This is an example of one that doesn't ever make any advances. So this is different than where we are now, which is a positive. Because this one fails to advance on a number of levels, but ultimately it's the same concept. You've got like a pinning that's happening here, and then when push comes to shove and it tries to advance again, it can't advance. And a lot of people will look at it and say it's just a pennant, it should break out. But what's happening is that they've already checked liquidity here and they've dived low and they found too many sellers. There was a weakness right here in the chart. So what happens is that you get to the end of this, and it's still doing that iteration business, by the way. And I always get these people on here that tell me that I don't understand fractals and all that jazz. And I'm like, look, dude, I don't want to say I wrote the book on it, but there was a lot that I did about this area early on. I definitely understand fractals. And I'm telling you, this isn't like an iterative move here. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again into like a corner. And it just keeps shrinking down, even to the minuscule level, right? So not going to go into this any further than just to say that, but point being is that as it's doing that and you are getting that shrinking, which is fine, it's driving the price lower, but it starts doing something kind of odd. Like it looks like it's going to build up, volume kind of dropped off. Some of you guys are like peeing your pants right now, like, well, what if this is what we're doing? Maybe. But you can see like this is where it really becomes hyper distributive. It can no longer make an advancement over that midline, and it fails to do it. And so all of these trajectories that these could have beens, these ones never get fulfilled. And they're there, they're legitimate, you know. These are the markers that you're like, oh, it's going to accelerate into some point up here, and you know what I mean? Like, we would have said the same thing back then. I think there were a lot of people who were looking for this to potentially move back up to the top. Now, are there differences? Sure, there's differences, but one of the biggest keys here, one of the biggest and most important things is that this never crossed the downward creek. That's one. It doesn't make any advancements across any of the downward creek. You might say, well, what about this one? Well, this one continues to play out later, as you can see here, right? But this is definitely an example of one that it's hard to see it. I mean, I think a lot of folks were looking at it and we were thinking at the time that it was going to break back to the upside because it looks so much like the other fractal that it just couldn't be any different. There's no way it's going to be different because fractals are like perfect prophetic tools, right? Sarcasm, okay? They're not. And frustrating as it may sound, this kind of goes like basically polar opposite. You know, when we look at this in retrospect, you're like, yeah, it pretty much just died and went completely 180 the other way. Almost like a perfect 180 the other way, because it failed to advance here. And you can see it in the chart. I mean, I don't have to prove that to you. So it's really important to note that when you get to those second cat ears, it's not a given that you're going to run unless it's jumped the creek. And even if it's jumped the creek, you still have to make sure that it continues to advance. So this may not look great right now when you're staring at it, because you're like, man, I'm getting a lot of vibes. And you should be. Good. You should be getting a lot of vibes of where we are now, because we've been doing this kind of motion repeatedly. Are there any major differences? Yes. One of the major differences is this has largely made higher lows throughout, but this did too. I mean, you could have argued that this was making higher lows, but this really didn't ever make higher highs. This is all one move, even though there's two up thrusts in it. And then it stopped making higher highs, starts bleeding back down. Another thing that's kind of confusing is this might look a lot like, and you'll probably see it somewhat, this might look a lot like what you saw in May. It's pretty similar. And it also looks a lot like what you see in January to June run-up. They're all pretty similar up until the end. And the key difference is that this is like what I'm trying to say, like it's hard to know. You can speculate about fractals and all that junk all you want, but at the end of the day, it's a question of volume and strength, you know, going into those last jumps. So this is very, very, very similar, except for what? Well, they both jump the creek, but this creek itself is actually not the same creek. So you can see like there's a great similarity between the two, except for a pretty key factor, which is that the major creek here, which is like the major downtrend that you see on the top here, that's not the same as this one. This one's like very, very steep, and it does, in this move, jump over it, advance back to the top here, and SOS. This one never does that. So does it look like it jumps a creek? Yes. But notice this particular target right here never came back to the top. So this ends up being like a lower iteration than the other. So the better way to kind of do this would be to drive this price, would actually be to do this and say this is the way it could have been. This should have come up to the top. Then if it had jumped, you would say that's right. But it doesn't ever make that advancement, does it? So even though those fractals are essentially one-to-one, and you may have looked at that at the time as I did and say, well, they're one-to-one. It's the same sequence. Yeah, they are the same sequence. The manner in which they hit those highs and lows really matters, and like where they go. So in that one example I just gave you from that January to June, it comes up all the way to the top here, and then when it advances the second time, it doesn't fail to jump that creek. So to fix this chart, if you want to fix it, you may have had this one advance high and then come back down, and then here you would see this advancement as the jump here, and so on and so forth. Okay. So how does that stack up to where we are now? Well, if it's fresh in your brain, I think it's a good time to look at it, because you need to take note, because it's very critical that this does the right thing. Otherwise, it's not going anywhere. Even if it's made all the right moves, even if it looks great, and I think it does. I think it looks pretty good on the big picture. I've been very clear, I think, that I'm fairly bullish on the overall picture here. I think it looks positive overall. What's something that we're failing to do right now? We're failing to make that advancement at present, right? We're failing to make that advancement here, and that's not a positive. We're trying to get over this local creek. So this is going to have to be like some kind of a massive kind of swing up, you know, in the end. There's some other stuff here that's kind of odd. Like we can't use this line very easily, can we? And even if you do use it, you're like, well, we did jump it, so it's over, right? Maybe. There's not really much else to use here. We kind of have to just use what we got. And the only other marker we have that's relevant is this one. And I don't even know where to put it now. They raised the resistance 3 times and then they started making lower lows. So is that red line? That's basically where it is. It's way up here. So for us to kind of satisfy this range, I think we're in a different situation where we need to see that. Maybe we do need to see that back up, but we need to almost immediately come back up. We need to start breaking back above 520s. We need to start breaking back above 540s. I don't see this as like overtly positive that it didn't try to make that advancement today. And I don't see it as overtly positive that it looks really easy to pin it at 5. That doesn't mean I'm not bullish on it. It just means that for now, that's not looking very hot. So I'm pretty annoyed with the price action today on the whole. I think that advancement had potential, and I think it could have broken here and it didn't. And as a result, I think they're going to sell it back down potentially tomorrow. We'll see. I'd be so happy if I'm wrong. But if they sell it back down, I want to see like an immediate return. And I'm pretty convinced at this point that it's going to go, but if we don't see like that drop and like an immediate return in this particular case because of where it is, I think we're in danger, you know? I think we're in danger of capitulating the wrong way. Almost by nature of just not having the buyers or something, which is weird. Because I know the bigger operators are buying. I think there's an intention here to make it look kind of bearish, right? And we've also already had that kind of spring action here as well. So there's a question also of like, well, where the heck is the floor, you know, and how do you get back to it and all this other stuff. I think we've already kind of had a double dip right here through it. And yeah, it's just kind of in a pinch. Yep. So I'm demonstrating that not to scare you, but just to remind you that the end of a cat ear, that flat area, it happens on almost every range, or something like it happens on almost every range. It's a flip of a coin if you don't read the chart right. If we're reading the chart right, we should get it right. But I gotta say, like, the lack of push here is concerning. The advancement over this creek is fine. Nothing really to gripe about there. But the lack of advancement on the whole is very concerning, for sure. So I don't think it's horrible. I just think that it's going to be like really, really nail-biting kind of stuff, unfortunately. I'm not telling anyone to be scared. I'm just saying there is actual risk involved here that's embedded in this. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of tired of seeing AMC share in the downside but not share in the upside. And sometimes that seems to be the case. That idea of like negative beta isn't really a thing. It's more just an observation of what's happening. But meaning it's just there and it's always changing. But I think that when it does seem that way, it's usually because we're like participating in sell-offs, but we're not participating very much in the buy-ups. So I don't want to see that for AMC. I don't think you want to see it either. I don't know. It's a pretty annoying chart. Kind of right where it needs to be too for that flip. It's right down where it needs to be. Well, you know, what I might do is just start looking at just my liquidity on the whole and see what I want to do there. Because I don't know if I want to play AMC like short term if it's going to be like this undecisive. If you don't make decisive moves tomorrow or Monday, I think I'm going to reassess my the way I'm positioned in it because I don't like the uncertainty. I don't care if it just suddenly runs. If I'm in a position where I feel like, yeah, this uncertainty isn't really working, then I'm going to have to make an adjustment. I can't waste any more time on this stock if it's not going to move. I'm just load up on longs and just wait. We're so close, and yet it's not giving any definite signs to me. I feel like that creek cross that we had this week is the best thing that's happened, but there's zero follow through. And now it just looks like it's forming a cat ear to go back down to 5, and I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, all right, well, hopefully that works out, you know? And we pop from that point. That's the only thing I can see right now is like coming dropping down there and then just turning back around. I don't know what else you would do to get a move going here. And I've talked about that flush as like a possible catalyst. I mean, I've said it a number of times in a number of ways, but there's kind of a part of me that almost wants that because I want to see that dip and to test liquidity and maybe also check that creek, you know, at the same time, and then just go, you know, the other way. It doesn't really fall in line with the S curve, but it does fall in line with wave crosses and how they often go back and check their levels once they jump. So just be prepared, I guess. It's like the same angle. I said I was going to keep it short. I don't want to go really long. There's other stuff I want to do still. So I'm probably going to head out in just a minute. I'm just kind of finishing this. Yeah, I think there's a decent chance that that's our, that right there is our jump, you know. And that's good, because coming back down, it means that you can kind of hit this pocket and potentially just go from there. You don't have to go ridiculously low. So I'm trying to my best to find, like, where would I sort of cut ties with it, and where would I say that it's not cut ties, but you know what I mean. Like, where would I say, like, oh, it's done. I think that's a good spot. I think this is the jump here. So that's kind of your wall. So I believe this would be a good spot to consider like a no-fly zone. Like, don't go beneath here. I think if you go beneath here, you're probably in trouble. Like, that's where capitulation would probably happen. And it's a lot. I mean, you have to go through a lot of stuff to go down, but it wouldn't be pleasant. So if it starts sliding this way, I'd be like, nope, that's not what I want to see. That's probably where it would happen, where you'd have like a big creek cross and then some kind of a, it'd be nasty though. It'd be some kind of massive like sell down over time. This looks a lot like, it's so weird looking. It looks a lot like those springs, but it's like in the wrong spot. It's just in the wrong spot. It's not where a spring usually is. That spring in March, I talk about March a lot because March is just such a nice example. But they all kind of look the same. And when you see them, they're not that complicated. They're just like really compressed Wyckofian accumulation ranges, but they look really weird. And I call it like the quadruple flush, because you'll see like the M shape, but it's so fast. It's this thing right here, that you almost miss it. You almost miss that this is like an auto reaction support phase B top spring. You know what I mean? Like, it's so quick that it doesn't even register, right? And this is kind of what I expect from that spring action, I guess. Let's get a little more data on that before I snag a bars pattern from it. Ah! What are you doing? Oh my gosh. My cat. I don't know if you heard that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he's fine, dude. Just my big fat cat came bolting across the floor and slammed into the chair full speed. I hope he's okay. I think he overestimated his size. Like, he thought he could go underneath it or something. He cannot. He just slammed into it. It's like a cartoon, just giant thing trying to fit into a small hole. It shook the whole chair. I'm like close to 200 pounds and it pushed the chair. That's how fast he was going. And how big he is. He's like, put him on a diet, Booksy. I don't know. Yeah, you see that motion here with that up thrust and like the belly and the high. That's why I was wondering if it went higher, because I was like, well, maybe that's a spring. And then this would be like an LPS. It's weird though. I can go to I guess I could go find the one from March too, but it's fairly similar. It's pretty much the exact same action. It's just kind of interesting. I think it looks different. The cats today have been just crazy. Yeah, it scared the crap out of you. It scared me. I'm the one that got run into. I don't even know what he was chasing. I think he was running away from something. I don't think he was chasing something. I think he was running away from the other cat, but golly, man. Just full on smash into the chair. Active, if you want to join, I can send you a link tomorrow. I'm not on there right now, so I can't grab it, but I'm sorry. Sorry about the mic. But if you want, ask me again tomorrow about the Discord group, and I'll let you know. You gotta just message me, and then I will send you a link invite. If you do and join, you have to make sure that you read through and understand the rules. It's not, there's no cost to it, but it's not a place to just kind of come and like chit chat or gossip about things. It's really about doing stock analysis and chart analysis. So anything about stock or chart analysis is more than welcome. Somebody was kind of a little grumpy about that earlier. Don't worry about that. As long as you're on point, I'm not going to do anything about it. If you're talking about the stock, you're free to talk about it. Somebody was saying they wanted less chatter so they could hear my messages, and I'm like, well, that's not really what this is about, either. It's like I will message on there every now and then. I tend to be one of the most frequent people to post charts, but anyone can post anything they want to post as long as it's good TA or attempted good TA. I'll take a look at it too. I tend to be pretty active in there when I'm working. So anyways, yeah, this looks pretty good. Other than the possibility of downside of 5 tomorrow. I just wonder about it. So anything holding up stronger and not dropping tomorrow would be positive. Anything not going below maybe 510, maybe 506, that would be pretty positive. 506 is almost ideal. But anything else going down to 5, I think we would just have to keep our ears really close to the ground and just see what happens, come Monday. It's a really frustrating chart, but I think we just kind of stalled out, and we're just not getting those big moves yet. So man, I'm sorry, these cats are still going. Probably. Excuse me. So I don't know what's wrong with him today. He's just acting weird. He's just really relaxed. Maybe I didn't give him enough attention today. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a weird requirement, but cats are very needy creatures, despite what people may say. They do their own thing a lot, but they're also very they're very independent, but they really like attention and affection. I'm just flipping the chart just to see it. excuse me. I mean, just being straightforward, it does look like the kind of chart that would require like a last up thrust. I hate to say that. So I flipped AMC upside down. Last thing I'm going to do, I promise, I really am going to get off. I just want to see it one more time. And upside down land is good to look at every now and then because it's like a cat ear here, and then this one would have to come back above here. So I think I'm right. So if this doesn't breach 491, it's not going down. Because if in normal like terms, this is like a cat ear, right? Then you'd have the second one, and that's going to have its own attempted move. And it would make sense here maybe to have one more up thrust. Because like we didn't, you guys are like one more, that's like down thrust in regular chart terms. But why? Because when you cross an important threshold, the market likes to go back and check it. And this kind of looks like a check, but it also kind of isn't. And I mentioned this earlier. This is like a double, it's like a whip around. So it whips around it, but it didn't actually check it on the way out. So what would a check accomplish here? It'd be like a massive bear trap, because if you pushed up, or in our terms, drop through, right? If we're thinking about this in reverse, which is correct. You're like, what? If it pushed and it went slightly below, like, all right, we're so used to this going down, right? It's almost easier to chart the downside. So if you flip it over, it's like as if you're charting it, it's about to go down. But notice that if you go slightly above, which is slightly below 5 here, that actually gives you like an up thrust, and it gives you the check on this curve. So it's like a hook, right, of this creek down. Okay, so let me just repeat that. If you go back up, you would, if this were an upside down land and you saw this come peak above the recent high, which is like 499. So if you're a bear, that's like, oh, it comes to 498 or something. You saw it peak above the recent high, and then it didn't hold the creek when it came back through. So it then goes and passes back above 510. So the order of operations is basically like 498, then above 510. That would be a couple things for us. It would be a back test on the creek for us and possibly a spring. And then for a bear, if it did that, it'd be like what we're saying about a drop beneath, like an up thrust and then a drop beneath here. So the answer is still like in question, but I actually think that makes a lot of sense. So once again, the idea of coming down to 5 might really stink. But on a bear side, it's actually like a head fake. Like a huge potential head fake. Because bears would gobble that up. And if it were to reverse Monday and then go back above, it's like done. My only real concern right now is that I'm just reading the chart wrong, and we're in sort of a distribution mode, and this is like some kind of weird, I don't know. It's going to have some massive push back down to 4 something, and yeah, I don't even know what that would look like. It'd be weird. It wouldn't make a lot of sense based on where we are, unless you're thinking that this is like this is where things get really bizarre. It's like, wait a minute, Booksy. Sometimes we do that on the bull side. We like cross the creek like low. Yeah. And then we come back above. We do that on the bull side, don't we? Yep. Sure do. That would be like a creek jump for the bears that then advances. It would be strange. But they don't have to me, they don't have what looks like a spring. They just got a phase B. That doesn't even seem very likely then. Because that's a double bottom. Oh man, this gets so complicated so fast. So this is why I wonder if the bears would need to kind of drive the price back up. So it makes me question it, because I kind of wonder if you do like a head fake. I'm just thinking if you're a short here, and then you drive the price up like it's going to run, but it doesn't. So it goes to like 523, then it comes back, pitters out here, and goes the other way. That actually may make more sense than what I said. Because then it keeps people in contention, and it gives the operator a chance to sell higher. Oof, nasty stuff. But that also was a possibility. We talked about that. You'd have to hold above 521. So there's nothing new under the sun here. It's just a different way to visualize the same ideas. Yeah, you don't want a head fake. Yeah, so part of me thinks you flush down to 499 regardless, and then, I mean, you could flush up here, but it almost makes more sense to go down first, then go up, and then if you were going to distribute, you could do that, because in reverse, I mean, that's just like a real fake out though, you know. Actually, in some ways, I know this is going to sound really weird, but in some ways, if it doesn't come back below 506, which is kind of where I said I didn't want it to go, but in some ways, if it doesn't come above 506, it almost makes more sense as a bearish move. You're like, say what? What I drew here is essentially the same thing that happened right here. Is it leapt over a creek and went back to test it, and then it drove the price, quote unquote, low. It's the same motion. There's chop down, there's like a low shallow S curve just like here, pushes up, goes back to check that creek here, and this is met later, and then it drives the price down to new lows. This is where you get the quote unquote spring, although in our case it was upside down, it was with a head fake. It's a pretty similar motion, it's just slow. That's interesting. Well, I don't think much is required here, but I think if it goes below 506 in some capacity, I think there's a greater chance that it's going to reverse and go back up high again. I know it sounds weird. It sounds kind of backwards. But if it dips below here, the possibility of a head fake becomes more real. I think it makes more sense. Yeah, the key is just 521. It cannot come back down through this creek after it hits 521. It just can't. There may be one extra thing we can draw depending on where it is, because if it doesn't come very low, it could be the case that it stays on this trend and it doesn't come below that. If it doesn't come very low, that's another trend we could use as a possible like support for later. Like, oh, we don't want it to come back beneath this level at 504. But I do not want to see it come above 525 and then, or 521 and then come back below 504, especially if it does this downward move like we think it might tomorrow. That would be not good. So I'm going to go ahead and hang my hat on it. I think we could either end up at 501 or just slightly below and then back to $5 at close. So I think the lows tomorrow is going to be 502 or like 597 if we go down. Those make the most sense to me here. The rest will be kind of just a tricky situation. This is a great place to catch it. This would throw off everybody. If it came back above, no matter what happened, you'd be like, oh, it's coming up. If it came back above and it chopped here Monday, midday, and didn't run right up right away, it'd be hugely confusing to the market. Because that would be a potential SOS, but it's also essentially like it's kind of an upthrust after distribution, but I would almost call it just an upthrust. So we got to get there and hold it Monday. It's going to be a mess. That's really all there is to it, isn't it? Because the bull path is just, it's the same path, but you don't go below. It's basically the exact same path, except you don't go back below here. Instead, you stay high and you create like an adequate SOS and then go again. Yep. It's the same pathway, basically. Well, that's crazy. I think what's most unlikely is, and there's no real difference in these bottoms, it's just preference, I guess. I don't think there's a huge difference. What's most likely is down tomorrow, then back up Monday, and then I don't think it's going to take all the way till Tuesday, but it could. I think it could be one of those things where we come up Monday and sit around 520, and then maybe Tuesday or Wednesday we have more of a definitive decision or some kind of news, like everybody likes to talk about news. And you make those advances or you don't. Because this is correct. Like if you look at this, it's a kind of an odd statement to make, but if it comes down to near 5 tomorrow, regardless, it's basically gone back on a creek that's going upward, which bulls would look at as a breakdown, bears would look at it as a breakout. But the whip around is where it's key, because then it becomes like a head fake to the bear side, and that's where things can get really dicey with the interpretation, as it sort of depends on how low you go. I think there's a stronger chance. Yeah, I think there's a stronger chance that it's bullish. I know this is going to sound weird, but there's actually probably a stronger chance that it's bullish if this goes below 499. I know that sounds weird, But I think it's a stronger probability that it's actually bullish if it comes slightly lower, because in layman's term, that's like a double top. So it's like a higher high on the bear side. And if I saw that and we were on the bull side, especially if we were underneath like a creek here like this, and I saw that push higher and then drop below, I would be screaming it's distribution. So because that doesn't look right. Like, it doesn't look right from that point of view. So weird as it may seem, it's actually, and I know you guys don't want to go down. I don't want to go down either, but it would be much clearer anyways. I'd be a little bit more like, okay, I think I know what we're going to do if this comes down below and comes low tomorrow, strangely enough. So it need to come low and then recover above. You know, you might note, and this is kind of important, you might note that this looks essentially like the exact same move we just did. And I think that's important because I think it is basically the exact same move we just did in some ways. This move right here, you're like, wait a minute, we just did that dip and then that chop above. Were you going to do it again? Well, if we did it again, and it does look like a very similar move, the difference, of course, this time is, again, where is it hitting? Because the first one checked this kind of inner creek cross, which might be enough, but the second one would check that big outer creek cross that comes from that weird flush we had in July. And that's very critical. Like, it's really important. So it's not like it just keeps going indefinitely to do that, though there could, I guess, be a backup here. That's always a possibility. Yeah, that's a possibility. You could have a you could have like a backup right here, and it could still be strong. This is going to be really annoying to watch, isn't it? You guys are like, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah, we never get this. We never get the right thing. But it would be, best SOS here would be a push up to like 24 that chops between 24 and 16 and only makes higher lows until it drops. I know you think it doesn't need a drop, but that's like a completion again of an iteration M cross here. That would be the end. Push up, and then it would go. Then you've got a free move basically, and it's starting to look like the 20th, 21st. Dave's gonna have a cow about it. Then you've got a pretty succinct pathway to the top. Yeah, that actually makes more sense to me. How this works on the bigger picture, I don't know. I could be wrong. It could just melt up tomorrow, but the way this thing developed outward, it slowed everything down a bit. There's no acceleration points coming to the, in my opinion, immediately up. Hopefully I'm wrong and it just goes up. Yeah, this is how you would see that in reverse. It's pretty darn similar in reverse. I wonder what 498 gives you. Hang on, one more. You guys are like, you said you were going to stop like 30 minutes ago, Booksy. You did not stop. I know. But let me see. If that's a drop-off point, this should go up pretty far. This should go as high as 529. Potentially. I guess it wouldn't go as high if it were doing the other path. It's going to be a tricky one. AMC is holding up though. that question of is this accumulation or distribution is a contextual question. It depends on the time frame. If I zoom out and look at the big picture, I still don't really see it as distributive. It looks much more cumulative to me. These kind of iterative moves down with those spikes below have definitely shown some serious strength. It just kind of floats back up every time. The lower highs is a problem. And every time we've come up to these lower highs, these shelf levels, one's at like 550, one was at like 530, and now it's like basically like 515, right? Every time we've kind of made those shelf levels, we haven't had any more advancements. So there needed to be a change, and I think that change has happened here, is it did an M cross and jumped the creek. Okay? But putting it into context, do I think this local range looks really accumulative or does it look kind of distributive? I mean, I've already talked about it. It just doesn't look super bullish to me for some reason, but also mainly because of these up thrusts. I don't say for some reason, but for these up thrusts, they just don't really have that vibe of accumulation typically. This would have been the move right here because this spike low, this is what I was saying kind of yesterday and going into today, is like that pushed down to a new lows. This is like a double flush that wrapped around the outermost creek, and it actually checked the bottom, and it reacts really strongly, and it didn't fall through. We accurately reset RSI, but we failed to make that advancement, so it wasn't there again. So what I thought was going to happen, I put it on the chart in the middle of the day, and I said I wasn't going to come back if it didn't do it because I don't really want to sit here and watch the chart do nothing. But I had gone to the 6-minute earlier in the day and said that I thought what needed to happen is this needed to come down to about 40 and then push back out and advance. And instead, what happened is it bounced on the 40 twice and it still held underneath. So in theory, what this is telling me is that we're still pinned beneath the local creek, and we really haven't confirmed any kind of serious upside or downside or whatever just yet because we haven't even jumped like the local creek. So my hope was that this was going to push up, find that support, and then finally press up above. And we could have ended in much the same spot, but it would have been higher, a little slightly higher, and on top of 514. And ultimately, I think we would have advanced to the 520s pretty quickly, but maybe not today. But that didn't happen. So you take it as it comes, you know, like until it jumps this little local creek here and finds support, you cannot say it's bullish. And unfortunately for Friday, this little tiny range right here, it looks more like a UTAD kind of business where it's going to try to do that last second push up. It's going to come slightly high, like 514 again, but this time it's going to be slipping above that creek, and then it probably nosedives. Just to be honest, I don't think it's going to hold up for Friday. I think they're going to sell it down. Unless your operator steps in and he does the do the right thing, man. Unless he pushes up here and you see that support and then it starts going, that's about the only situation I can think tomorrow where this ends like really well for us tomorrow. I think tomorrow is going to be pretty red. That's just the vibe I'm getting from this setup because they did not advance it again. And every single day this week, we've had massive buy-ins until today, at the end of the day. And they just purposely did not push it up. So maybe it's going to be some kind of a magical Friday move, which we don't ever get. Maybe that's when it finally happens and they say, screw Max Payne, and they just go. Maybe. But I think that right now, it's safe to say that it's probable, very probable in my mind, that it's going to come back down. I think we're going to be down at 497 again. And so locally, does this look like cumulative or distributive? It kind of looks distributive. But these are the tops. What happens after it comes back to like 498, that's where things can get kind of interesting. So your question requires context because I think short term, a lot of this has been fairly distributive looking. The lack of advancement, the weak creek crosses, they're there. That's bullish. It's bullish that this happened right here. But we still look like we need to come back down to me, and it looks like it's setting up for that possibility tomorrow. So I'm not in a particular position where I'm worried about anything. I'm just kind of like, okay, it doesn't look like it's going to go again. Took a shower as I worked out. All right. Yeah. That's the recap. So I think tomorrow is going to be 5, and then we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this is like pinching up and it doesn't break that larger triangle. But I think this might be just kind of an indication of like possibly that next move to come. We'll see. It definitely did something like that on the smaller triangle. You have to understand, like, it's not what I want to have happen. If I had my way, I would just go ahead and run it because it's above the creek. But based on the way that Friday's been working out, or not working out, I should say, for AMC, it's really hard to advocate that kind of a move right here. Well, I guess we'll find out. All right, I'm done. We'll see you guys tomorrow.